Hey everyone, Laura Thomas here, and I wanted to talk to you a little bit today about a topic that comes up quite a bit actually with clients, clients who have kids, who don't have kids, who have full-time jobs, who have stressful jobs, non-stressful jobs, and that is the topic of boundaries. So many times what can happen is that I'll bring a client on and they have every intention to start their workout plan and then life starts getting in the way, right? And many times this can be because boundaries are not being held with that client between themselves and typically themselves and themselves, or themselves and their work, and themselves and their family, right? So there's a lot of different boundaries that may be getting crossed, and therefore the time for self-care or workouts is getting really, really skewed. Now, I'm not a therapist, so I cannot sit here and diagnose somebody and say, well, it's because of this that you have boundary issues. Many times boundary issues can show up and come from something that happened, in our past, and that's not for me to diagnose. That's a little bit out of my scope. But I know for me personally, sometimes my boundaries are a little bit, sometimes can get a little bit wavered because of the fact that I always wanted to be a giver and do good and things like that. So sometimes I'll bend and break myself to the point where I'm exhausted and I'm just giving too much. So over the last couple of years, that really shifted after I kind of stopped volunteering for things a lot. And I really started scaling back on what I felt was important, which I think the pandemic really showed a lot of us, what is important, where we should be spending our time, and what we want to do, where we want to draw those boundaries and say, before the pandemic, I was volunteering with this organization, but now I realize that was taking up a lot of my time, and maybe that wasn't where my energy was best spent. Like maybe I just want to be home with my partner or go for a walk with a friend in that time that I was doing that. And it's not, I know it sounds really selfish because it's like, oh, well, now you're not volunteering and now you're not doing something for the greater good. But at the same time, you're taking care of yourself, right? And I always say at the end of the day, what are people going to remember you for, right? They're going to remember you as being a good person and a good friend and a good family member, and they're probably not going to remember you for all the hours and hours of overtime that you did at your job, right? Quick story. So a lot of this stems from the fact that my dad had a heart attack when I was 15 and he was 46 at the time. And it was stress induced. It was from him overworking. And he had a heart attack very shortly after he married my stepmom, like within a month actually. And it was very scary. And it scared my dad and it scared me and it scared everyone around us. And after that, my dad actually switched jobs because he knew that he couldn't handle all that stress level anymore of his job. So I tell that quick story just to kind of give you a little bit of a setting as to why, for example, like work-life balance or work-life fit, as Highland Software likes to call it here in Cleveland, is so critically important because you can work your tail off, but are people really appreciating it, right? Is that really where you want to go? So I'm going to share a couple of resources that I find really helpful. I'm going to do a little bit of reading. So if I look down from the camera, that's what I'm doing. And I just want to share with you a little bit of things that I've read over the past few years that have really helped me. So first, I'm going to start with Molly Galbraith, who is the woman that wrote my pre and postnatal training. And she is amazing. I just think she has such a great view on women and women in business and women in fitness and all that kind of stuff. So I think she's really relevant to this conversation. So I'm just going to read a little passage from her book called Strong Women Lift Each Other Up. Boundary setting might sound selfish, but it allows you to be incredibly generous with your assumptions because you don't allow yourself to be taken advantage of, and you have a clearer idea of what's okay and what's not okay. When we have that sense of security, we have more room to give to others. When respected, boundaries also deepen trust. They give both parties clarity. There's no guessing in the relationship. These benefits allow us to work more collaboratively and constructively with others. Yet as women, the struggle to prioritize our own needs and boundaries and not feel bad or guilty about it is real. This may be, at least in part, because women are typically praised for being devoted and selfless and for putting everyone else's needs before their own. Boundaries are a huge topic that could take up easily their own chapter, but for the purposes of this section, here's what you need to know. Boundaries are what you determine is okay and not okay in a relationship. Different experts categorize boundaries differently, so she breaks it down into 6 different types. So emotional boundaries, so boundaries around inappropriate topics, when it's okay to share things, and dismissing, criticizing, or minimizing of emotions. Intellectual, So boundaries that give you freedom and your own thoughts, ideas, beliefs, and opinions. Time and energy. So boundaries around time. So this is what I'm talking about with kind of self-care. When and how it's okay to contact someone. Favors or demands on time, and free labor. So you'll notice sometimes as a coach, if you're a client of mine, I will say, I won't respond to you sometimes if you text me at 9 o'clock at night. I'm trying to actually set a boundary with you to say, that's cool that you texted me at that time and that's when you're thinking about it. I'm totally fine with that, but I might not get back to you the following morning because I'm trying to establish a boundary with you saying, these are the times that I'm available to check in, if that makes sense. Material. Boundaries around money and possessions, specifically what you will share with whom and how your possessions are treated. Physical boundaries, right? So around personal space and touch, including what's appropriate in different settings, and unwanted comments regarding appearance or sexuality. And then of course, sexual boundaries would include the emotional, intellectual, and physical aspects of sexuality, including consent, agreement, respect, understanding of preferences and desires, and privacy. So you always, obviously you're gonna set different boundaries with different people based on your relationship dynamic. So the big thing here is communication, right? Huge. If you notice, that's something that I really like to bring forth in my business, because for me, I saw a huge lack of communication when I've worked in other settings and other workplaces throughout my career. And I just saw how poor communication was. So I do have a high expectation of communication for myself and for my clients, right? So if I don't hear from a client for a long time, I'm like, is everything okay? And so I have to remind myself that, like, Laura, not everybody communicates like you. Some people are more reserved and don't need to communicate as frequently, which is fine. But also I need to make sure that people aren't in trouble. I sometimes go to the worst case scenario because I have trauma from my past, right? Where like I've lost people in the blink of an eye. So for me, that triggers that for me, right? That's saying like, okay, I haven't heard from so-and-so in like 2 weeks. Like, are they okay? Has something happened? Did somebody die? Like, I go to worst case scenario because I've gone through worst case scenario in my life, right? Like my brother was here one day and gone, and I didn't know for 2 days, right? That's the trauma that I carry with me. So that does sometimes spill over a little bit into communication with my business. It just is what it is. So you have to determine what behavior or treatment is okay and not okay with a specific person, clearly communicating that boundary to the other person. So I'll give you an example. At my last job, my boss would sometimes call me on my cell phone. My boss did not pay my cell phone bill. Okay, I was still paying for my own cell phone bill. In fact, if we really want to get really like nitty gritty, I was actually also paying for the graphic design software that I was making like half of the things for at my old job. Yeah. And I went to them a couple times and was like, I am like using this so our stuff doesn't look like, and they were like, oh, and I was like, well then I'll just write it off. You know what I mean? But yeah, my boss would call me on my cell phone. If I was in the office, I never picked it up. I would let it go to voicemail, and then I would pick up my work phone and call him, because I was establishing a boundary of, you don't call me on my cell phone when I'm sitting at the desk and the phone that you pay for, because that's not going to happen. Same thing with texting. He would text me sometimes, and sometimes I would respond, pick up the phone and be like, hey, I saw you're trying to get a hold of me. What's up? Right? That was me saying like, you can text me and call me on my personal phone as much as you want, but I'm using the phone that you're paying for to call you back on, because you are not paying for my cell phone. Does that make sense? And then also, you know, inviting people to share in your boundaries too. Like my first boss that I had at my last job was actually really good about this. And he kind of hooked on after a while. He was like, oh, you know, she is trying to tell me that, you know, if I call her, you know, and it's not something urgent, she's not going to get back to me right away, right? Because unless it's like earth shattering, the world's going to fall apart, whatever, like I probably don't need to get back to you on it. And in fact, my first boss really ticked me off because I was at a conference. One of my advisors I was doing marketing for was bitching about something, because I always complain about the stupidest stuff. And he called me in the middle of this conference, and I missed a portion of a speaker that I was really enjoying to step out and take this call. And I got really upset, and I was like, listen, I did all my stuff right. I don't know what to tell you. And then lo and behold, when I got back to the office, one of my coworkers, my other coworkers, had lost her husband. Like he had been sick for a long time and he had passed away, and no one had told me. And I was livid. I was like, so you took the time to pull me out of a conference to tell me about this guy complaining about something really trivial and stupid at the end of the day, but you didn't tell me my coworker's husband passed away. Like, human first, you guys. Like, this is all about being a human first. Like, work is important, but you're a human first. You are a person with feelings and needs and things like that. So I think that is just so critically important to remember. So that was one thing I wanted to share with you about boundaries. So basically, you know, you can always role model what it looks like to uphold your own boundaries. Talk to other people in your life about respecting your boundaries. Speak up and support women, obviously, who, if you notice that other people's boundaries aren't being respected, those types of things can be really, really, really important. Now, another person I want to share about really quick is Byron Katie. If you don't know her work, her website is thework.com, and it's very self-analytical. It's definitely not the easiest thing to go through, because it's going to make it sound like you're kind of, in the beginning, it made me kind of feel like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna have to blame myself now for everything that goes wrong. But it's not. It's just basically exploring situations and asking yourself a few questions to really dive into the situation. So it's called an isolate a statement for inquiry, and applying her 4 questions. So let's say like you have this notion in your head. Okay, here's an example. My yoga class I just started at the JCC. I had a couple women come and then they haven't come back. So in my head, sometimes I'm thinking, did I do something wrong? Did I say something? Da, 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 right? You start making up these stories in your head, right? We do it all the time. Men and women, we do it all the time. So the first question you're supposed to ask yourself is it true? Is this story true? It's a simple yes or no. Is it true? So is it true that these women didn't come back to my yoga class because of something I did? Probably not, because I can't say for sure. And then the next question is, can you absolutely know it's true? So if you answered question 1 is yes, ask yourself, can I absolutely know that it's true? So taking this opportunity to look again, shine the flashlight on that moment in time again and see what it reveals yourself to you. So if you said to the first question, yes, I do believe that I did something wrong, and this is why people aren't coming to my class. Can you absolutely know that that's true? Can I absolutely know that that's true? Right? No, probably not. The third question is, how do you react when, what happens and when you believe that thought, right? So closing your eyes and witnessing the feelings, the body sensations, the behaviors that arise when you believe that thought, and notice and report the answers to any of the following. So I'll read these slowly if you want to write them down. What images do you see, past or future? And what emotions or physical sensations arise as you witness images? How did you treat the other person? How did you treat yourself? Biggest question. Do obsessions or addictions begin to appear when you believe that thought? Right? And that doesn't have to be, that could just be an obsession of, oh my gosh, if I don't get this done today, people are going to think I don't do my job hard enough. Right? Like that could be an obsession or a thought that comes into your mind when you have these, you know, dilapidating ideas about yourself or about your work or whatever, right? Just as an example. So, and then the next question is, who would you be without that thought? So closing your eyes, returning to the situation, and you take a moment to reflect, observe, experience the situation again, and this time without the thought, right? Without the, is it true? Who would you be, who or what would you be without the thought? Right? So if I didn't have the thought of people aren't coming to my class because, you know, something I did or didn't do, who would I be without that thought? Well, I'd probably be like, you know, I'm doing what I can do right now and the best that I can do to my ability. Perhaps it's summertime and people have lots of things going on. Perhaps they have other children that they're tending to, right? There's like a lot of nuance. I think we forget about nuance. There's a lot of nuance that happens, right? So who would I be without the thought? I'd be like, oh, I'm just gonna keep pushing forward and keep doing what I'm doing. And I'm not gonna think too hard about what I am or am not doing, unless of course some feedback comes back that says that something went awry. I'm not going to really worry about it. I can't worry about it, right? Because then I'm just going to keep obsessing and coming down on myself for something that probably isn't true, right? So if we go back to the example of, something you have to do for work and you feel like if you don't do it, it's never, people are going to think you're not doing your job or you're not working hard enough or whatever. Well, is that task going to make or break you? Is that task going to get you fired or not? Probably not. Like most of the things that happen, unless they're a dire emergency, which I have witnessed this year with like my husband, and his work has been really crazy, but unless it's like a dire emergency, or like it's like we have to get this information out today or else whatever, most things are not timely. Like most things are not. Most things are not. And we have to just set that boundary of like, these are my work hours and this is when I'm doing my work. And for like my last job, as an example, I got paid from 8 to 5 or whatever, 9 to 5:30 or whatever the hours I worked. And if I worked outside of that, they actually were supposed to pay me overtime. So they actually told me like, please don't work over your time. So I didn't. I stopped doing that because I'm like, why? Otherwise, I'm going to have to turn in my time, get paid overtime. They're going to get pissed because they have to pay me overtime. And I would have to get like permission to work overtime. It was so stupid. Like, I'm not going to do that. That's just silly. And I'm sure as hell I'm not going to work for free. Sorry. And you know what happened? I'm out of that job 4 years, and I will tell you right now, I don't miss it. It's not like anybody's come back and said, Laura, all those times that you worked really hard and did that, and put up with a lot of the BS of that job, we can't thank you enough. I didn't get any of that. That never happened, right? So again, you are a human first, and you have to take care of yourself first, and drawing the line in the sand and saying, listen, I work from this time to this time, and occasionally I know that I'm going to have to work overtime occasionally. But then when that happens, I also know that over here, I'm going to take a morning off here, or I'm going to come in later or whatever to make up for the fact that like 2 weeks ago, I was working 4, 5, 10 hours overtime, right? So like balancing that time, I feel like is really, really critical if this is applicable to you and if this is something that happens, right? Because we don't live to work, we work to live, right? And that's why I've always been in love with like the European mentality of working, because they don't work to live. They don't live to work. They work to live. Like they take time with their families. That's so important to them. They take vacations. They take applicable time. A study just came out in Iceland about the 32-hour work week and how it's being so much more productive for people than 40 hours a week. And like, I don't personally work 40 hours a week right now. Like, I'm not a martyr to my business. I'm like, I'm always going to have things going on in my business. I can always work more in my business, right? But then I have to call it and say, am I going to work more in my business, or am I going to spend time with my family, right? Am I going to work out? Am I going to take a walk after dinner with my family? What's more important right now, right? And so we kind of have to just establish for ourselves what is truly important and ask ourselves these questions. I'm going to leave you with a couple other things to kind of meld on a little bit, some other questions. You can journal these. You might have to pause it because I'm going to go through them not too quickly, but a little bit. And these are from my my Vedic astrology coach. She actually has a boundaries training. I don't need to go through it, but I thought these were really great questions, so I wanted to put them out there for everyone. So the first question is, where in life do you have healthy boundaries with others? Where in your life do you have healthy boundaries with yourself? Where in your life do you need to, I don't like the word up level. Let's say, where in your life do you need to improve your boundaries with others? Where in your life do you need to improve your boundaries with yourself? What is not working in your relationship with others because of your unclear boundaries? And again, this can be not just with work, this can be with family, friends, organizations that you volunteer for, right? This can go a lot of different directions. What is not working in your relationship with yourself because of your unclear boundaries? So is it, I really wanted to start a workout regimen this month, but it didn't happen because I have unclear boundaries with myself. Even if it's 10 minutes of movement, right? It doesn't have to be like this whole production. I think we get caught up in that too. Like, it doesn't have to be this whole thing, right? It can just be, let's start with 10 minutes. Let's see where that takes me. And then the next question is, what is having unclear boundaries costing you? I think is a really good question. And then a few more. What is the pattern at play that is keeping you from having healthy boundaries? What is the belief that is driving this pattern? So again, this might be diving back into things that happened in your past a little bit. Again, I'm not a therapist, so if this brings up anything very triggering, I would definitely recommend working with a professional because perhaps there are some things that you didn't work through back in your childhood that this is triggering now. Being a people pleaser, right? Being a giver. I get that. I'm the same way. I'm not 100% always, good at my boundaries, so I completely understand that mindset and that thought. And then what is the emotion connected to the belief, right? So maybe it's guilt and shame, like, oh, if I don't do this, someone's gonna think ill will of me. What people think about you, right? Like, if you're doing your job to the best of your ability, or if you're participating in a relationship to the ability, like, unless somebody's like, yo, and then even then, sometimes you have to say, well, this is where I'm at right now. I'm not operating at 100%. Nobody can operate at 100% all the time, right? Sometimes it's 50%, sometimes it's 80%, right? So we have to always remind people too, like, what, this is where I'm at right now with my energy. What is the emotion connected to belief? And then what is the new elevated emotion that will empower you, right? So what do you need to do to go from I don't like the word mindset because I think it's kind of a write-off, but what do you need to do to go from this headspace of, I'm not doing enough, or I'm not going to be viewed as I'm not doing enough, or what have you, to what emotion do I need to feel that's going to take me to improve this, right? Is it, I need to rid myself of guilt and shame? I would highly recommend, again, looking at Byron Katie's work. Brene Brown's work is amazing at this. I think both of these things are just really great when it comes to guilt, shame, things like that, especially women that we deal with. And kind of just walking yourself through, like, why do I feel this way? Like, where is this coming from? What's the foundation of it, right? Because there's always a foundation of something. And then the last thing I would say is, what is the new choice it is time for you to make? So maybe it's, I've been working 9 to 7 and I've been doing this for day in and day out, and it's not, and I'm putting aside a lot of my personal things that I want to do for myself. So maybe I start, because it's not something that's going to happen overnight. So maybe I start with 9 to 6. And then at 6 o'clock, I shut down my laptop. I shut down my phone, right? I don't even keep my phone in the same room. I keep my phone in my office, right? A lot of times what I'm trying to do now, and I didn't do it very well yesterday, but a lot of times what I'm trying to do now is actually take my phone and put it on the charger at night so that I'm not on it when I'm trying to spend time with my husband, as an example. Put your phone in a separate room. Put your computer in a separate room. The bedroom is only for sleeping. Okay. That's an example of something that a choice you can make, right? Like, don't check your phone first thing in the morning. If you ever notice, I do not have my business email on my phone. You will never see an email come through that says sent from my iPhone. It will never happen unless perhaps I'm out of town, but even then it's pretty rare. I don't have it on there because one of my mentors said in the very beginning of starting my business, do not put your work email on your phone ever. And so I don't. I check it when I need to on my computer. So those are some choices that I made for boundaries, right? And again, this isn't something that came out like that. It's something that took time, it took effort. You know, it's a privilege sometimes, right? Because I don't have somebody else I'm caretaking for and things like that. So I would definitely acknowledge that there's definitely privilege that comes along with this too. But I hope that kind of helps. I hope those examples help a little bit. This is, again, I'm not trying to give advice. I'm just trying to give a little bit of guidance here. If there is something that comes up for you as you're exploring the root cause of boundary setting and how hard it is, perhaps it's something to explore with a professional, just to kind of make sure that it's something you've processed and worked through so that you can continue to do that, not just, personally and professionally, but for yourself long term. So hope that helped, and let me know if you have any questions.